Well, hello, everybody. My name is Tommy Hexter, and I'm the Executive Director of the Iowa Food System Coalition. And on behalf of our entire coalition, we are so glad to be joined by Dave Dawson, candidate for Iowa's 4th Congressional District today. Thank you for joining us, Dave.
Thank you so much for having me. I really appreciate the opportunity.
And just real quick, I'll say a couple words and then we'll get into it. This is one of many educational candidate conversations we are having with statewide and federal office candidates in 2026. We reached out to all the candidates running for U.S. Congress, U.S. Senate, and statewide office, and we have scheduled interviews with all of those who have responded to our request. We've also sent all candidates a candidate engagement guide, which includes all of the questions we are going to ask, as well as some educational resources to help them research these topics on their own. And candidates still have time to schedule interviews with us until September 30th, 2026. So the general format for this is we'll go through 7 questions. We'll have a quick minute of context for each question, and then up to 3 minutes of answer for each. And if you're getting close to that 3 minutes, I'll hold up my red pen. And then, yeah, I think we can just go ahead and get right into it, Dave, if that sounds good with you.
That sounds good.
Okay, perfect. And feel free to introduce yourself a little bit more on this first question too, if you want to. But
Okay.
we'll count that into your time a little bit. So, the first question, we're going to start with topics that are more on-farm related, and then we'll get into more of the food systems, the supply chain, and then eventually nutrition programs, things like that. So, on-farm, we're going to talk about land and resource access and the next generation of Iowa farmers. So, access to affordable farmland and other resources is one of the major barriers facing beginning and emerging farmers. Iowa has a range of programs and organizations working to help new farmers access land, develop skills, and establish viable businesses, including the Iowa State University Beginning Farmer Center, farm incubator programs, land trusts working to pair farmers, and more recently, a USDA program called the Land Capital and Market Access Grant Program. And our question for you is, what policies or investments would you support to help beginning farmers access land and the resources they need to establish viable farm businesses and become the next generation of Iowa farmers?
And thank you so much for those introductory remarks. And I appreciate the opportunity to talk to people today. If people haven't met me before, I am Dave Dawson. I was born in Cherokee and grew up in a small town of Washita. It's about 300 people in southern Cherokee County. My grandfather was a farmer in rural Cherokee County, and my father ran a small fertilizer business in Washita for over 30 years, where he worked primarily with farmers in the ag industry. It's not my background. I work as a prosecutor in the county attorney's office, a job I've had for 19 years. So farming is not my expertise. But as a general matter, I do support making sure that beginning farmers have more opportunities. I know it's very difficult for people who want to farm and who don't already have a large amount of land in their family to get into the farming industry. Because I know that my nephew who lives in Marcus, just in Cherokee County, would love to be a farmer full time, but that's not, an opportunity that they have because their family, my brother-in-law's family, does not have a large amount of land. They have a small acreage where they do basically some custom feeding of hogs. So, but I do support the federal funding that is available to beginning farmers. I think other things that we could do is make sure that we ban ownership of Iowa farmland by foreign countries so that foreign countries are not coming in and buying up farmland and driving up prices and making it more difficult for beginning farmers to get into the farming business. And we also should incentivize farmers who want to live and work on their land. So programs that support those types of initiatives would also help prevent, foreign ownership or outside of the state ownership of Iowa farmland, which also has driven up farm prices.
Great answers. Thank you for that. Our next question is about labor and Iowa's food and farming workforce. So Iowa's food system depends on workers across the entire supply chain, from farms and livestock operations to food processing, distribution, grocery stores, restaurants, and all sorts of other food businesses. Workforce availability, wages, working conditions, immigration policy, and workforce development programs all have implications for Iowa's agricultural and food economy. And we have a very broad question on this. What do you see as the most important challenges facing Iowa's agricultural and food system workforce? And what role should the office you are seeking play in addressing those challenges?
Really, what I see at the federal level and in the state of Iowa is that wage levels have been suppressed for all workers. So at the federal level, I support raising the federal minimum wage. It's been stuck at 7.25 for 17 years. It's the longest period of time in American history that wages have been stuck so low. If you move just across the river from western Iowa into Nebraska, their minimum wage is $15 an hour, which would make it harder to compete if you were somebody who's going directly into the workforce and not going off for a higher education, and people who are maybe working as a farm hand or somebody who's assisting on the farm and working for low wages. It's not a great opportunity if you're working for such low stagnant wages. And I am a the only federal candidate in Iowa who is currently an active union member. So I support the PRO Act, which is the Protecting the Right to Organize Act, to make it easier for people to organize and form collective bargaining units so that they have stronger ability to ask for better wages and benefits. And with regards to immigration, I support immigration reform to make it easier to immigrate into this country because a lot of our farm labor in the state of Iowa comes from immigrant populations. So I would support making it easier to immigrate so that it doesn't take thousands of dollars and tens of, 10 years, to get a status that you can feel comfortable being in the country. And I want to make sure that we are continuing to be welcoming. So whatever policies we implement should be done on a way that's not discriminatory based upon where you're from or what your background is. Iowa has a history of welcoming immigrant populations dating back all the way to the 70s when I was just a kid and welcoming refugees from Vietnam. So we need to continue that history of being a welcoming state.
Great answers. Thank you for that. Our next topic is environmental stewardship. And this topic, there's a wide range of ways that farms and the environment are paired together. We hear a lot about water quality and cancer rates and pesticide use. We are going to focus on an issue that is more tied directly to food farmers that a lot of our members and advocates are working on. And this is pesticide drift. So pesticide drift is when pesticides move beyond their intended application area, damaging neighboring crops and creating economic and environmental consequences for farmers. And we've seen this continue to be a huge issue this year. A lot of Iowans are concerned about this. Um, and the question is, with pesticide drift posing a significant and existential threat to farmers whose crops or livelihoods are affected by neighboring pesticide applications, what role should the government play in preventing and responding to pesticide drift, protecting those who are growing organic or non-GMO crops? And what would you do in the office you are seeking to better protect Iowa farmers?
At the federal level, it's a hard thing to do to address these things, which are basically somebody damaging somebody else's property or maybe even causing damage to their health. And it's oftentimes you have to file a lawsuit to try and do that, which is difficult, especially if you are a low income person who does not have a lot of resources or access to an attorney. So there should be possibly some type of recovery fund at the federal level to make sure that people who are damaged as a result of pesticide applications are not left without recourse if there's damage done to, if it's their health or if it's damage done to their crops from pesticide drift. But we should also be making sure that we have a strong USDA program to encourage alternatives to pesticides. If there are things that we could do to make sure that our food crops are, healthy and not infected by pests, that are not overusing pesticides, and making sure we're being careful in the application of pesticides because we don't want anybody's neighboring crops to be damaged. I recall talking to a voter earlier this year before the primary, and he was talking about he is a beekeeper and he has had issues with pesticide drift damaging his beehive. So I think we need to make sure that we are all being good neighbors and that there are incentives to do the right thing by your neighbor.
Great answer. Thank you, Dave. And now we've talked about the on-farm policies. Now we're gonna move to the middle of the supply chain a little bit. And the next topic is farm and food business development. We recognize that Iowa has significant opportunities to capture more economic value from the food grown and raised here. We know that Iowans spend about $14 billion a year on food, and currently less than 5% of that is produced here in the state of Iowa. So strengthening markets for Iowa-grown products can create opportunities for farmers and food businesses, and keeping more of that agricultural economic activity within our Iowa communities. At the state level, the Choose Iowa program and its associated brand help promote that. And at the federal level, the local agriculture market program grants provide funds to these efforts to promote local markets. So my question is, what role should the government play in strengthening Iowa's farm and food businesses and growing demand for Iowa grown and Iowa made products through these marketing programs?
It really is crazy to me that Iowa has some of the best soil and the best farmland in the entire United States, and we are importing 95% of the food that we eat in the state of Iowa. We should be doing more, and I think it should be something that's included in the next farm bill that provides incentives for more crop diversification so that we have incentives for small and mid-sized farmers to be growing alternative crops, not just row crops, but growing food that we can actually eat and sell here in the state of Iowa, and that would, provide a greater supply here, so we wouldn't have to be importing so much food, and there would be greater opportunities for farmers to be developing that new line of foods that can be used here in the state, and we also would have an opportunity to develop more distribution systems in the state of Iowa and not just rely on importing all of our food.
Yeah, it's a great answer. And I think a lot of Iowans agree with you on that. How do we use this best soil in the world to grow some of the best food in the world right here in Iowa? In addition to the crops we're currently growing, just diversifying in some areas. And you were talking about developing, the distribution network. Our next question and priority area focuses on food system infrastructure. So building Iowa's local food supply chain. We know that all farms and food businesses rely on infrastructure, including processing, aggregation, storage, transportation, and distribution to connect Iowa's production with consumers and markets. And right now we have tons of infrastructure for certain crops, so corn and soybeans and pork, but very little infrastructure for some of those other food products. Iowa's Food Hub network provides one model for building this regional infrastructure. Federal programs such as the Regional Food System Infrastructure Program and the USDA Heartland Regional Food Business Center, which was cut in July of 2025, have provided resources for producers and businesses to develop processing and other infrastructure like transportation and storage. So, getting back to your point there, what investments or policies would you prioritize to strengthen this missing middle of Iowa's local and regional food system, including food hubs, processing, aggregation, storage, and distribution?
I believe the federal government should be doing more to incentivize small local business development with regards to not only food distribution but food processing. We have very few, even meat processing producers. We're basically at four companies that do that for the whole state of Iowa. And so if we don't have more competition, so there should be a greater opportunity for small businesses and not just farms to have the opportunity to get small business loans that allow them the opportunity to become an entrepreneur in this area and have the opportunity to invest in small rural communities, because I think that would really help Iowa's fourth congressional district, which is the most rural district in the state, to have more opportunities in small towns for business development as they continue to work to improve our food system.
Great answer. Yeah, and I think that economic development, the job creation possible with those extra food businesses. I know I've heard a lot about canneries that used to exist in Iowa that no longer exist, and the opportunities are really endless to what we can grow and process here to add value locally. So our now we're thinking about good food. We're going to move to our final section of questions, which focuses more on the consumer end, the table. Um, and our first question will focus on procurement. and this is connecting Iowa farmers with public institutions. We know in the past we've had programs like the Local Food for Schools program and the Local Food Purchasing Assistance Program, which are federal programs connecting farmers and food businesses with schools and food banks. These programs were discontinued, but at the state level, the Choose Iowa Purchasing Program has provided a significant opportunity, much smaller than the federal program, to encourage purchasing and consumption of Iowa-grown and Iowa-made products by schools and food banks. So my question is, how would you use your office to strengthen farm to school and other institutional purchasing opportunities for Iowa's farmers and food businesses? And how can we, aid farmers who have felt the cuts of those federal programs that left them without a key market to sell their products?
I would hope that at the federal level, we could work to restore some of the funding that was cut last year for these farm to table opportunities, not only with schools, but also with local food pantries and food banks so that they can use locally grown food more often and at greater quantity, which would give farmers a greater opportunity to have a market for these diversified crops that people can actually eat the food that is from their own community. I also support restoring the cuts to the food stamp or the SNAP benefits so that consumers have greater opportunities for purchasing foods because there is such great huge food insecurity in the state of Iowa, and it's been growing over the last several years. So people need opportunities to purchase because the investment, if you for every $1 of federal food SNAP benefits that are invested, the economic development in the local community is over $1.50. So that is a benefit that goes right back into the farm economy, and I think we need to restore that funding that would only help Iowa's fourth district.
Yeah, it's win-win. The Farm and Nutrition Coalition, you bring benefits for farmers and benefits for people that need food. Um, and our last question here, our last topic is about food, nutrition, and health, and connecting the food and the soil with the health of our population here in Iowa. And as we know, food and health are deeply interconnected. And there are many pieces to this larger food and health puzzle, like things you were just talking about, SNAP and Medicaid. Um, Particularly in Iowa's food system, the farm to food as medicine approach is quickly emerging, connecting Iowa agriculture with healthcare and nutrition interventions through Medicaid reimbursement for nutrition-related programs. Other efforts include Double Up Food Bucks and the Iowa Produce Prescription Program, which are both broader efforts through the Iowa Healthiest State Initiative. We're really curious in this time where public health and nutrition are so important in our country. How should Iowa work to connect food and agricultural policy with public health? And what role should the office you are seeking play in advancing approaches such as food as medicine, food as health, nutrition incentives, and any other strategies that improve access to healthy food and address diet-related health challenges?
When I was in the Iowa State Legislature, I was a big supporter of the double up food bucks that you could use at your local farmers markets for people who are seniors or disabled individuals. I think it makes sense to encourage the use of SNAP dollars also for local food markets and farmers markets so that people have opportunity for healthier choices so that they have healthier diets. But really, what we need to do at the federal level to make sure that people have adequate access to healthcare, regardless of whether they, work in the farm economy or whether they are low income, is to restore the healthcare funding cuts, not only to Medicaid and but also for the Affordable Care Act subsidies. There's over 25,000 Iowans, many of them in the ag community, who don't have an employer-based healthcare insurance. That we're going to be affected by having higher rates to pay for their marketplace insurance, and we need to make sure that healthcare is more affordable and accessible to everyone, no matter where you live, whether it's a small town or it's a big city or a farm somewhere in between.
Thank you for that answer. And I think we've run through all the questions that I had prepared, and so we have a couple minutes left. If you have anything else you want to share with the audience, that would be time to do it now.
I really appreciate the opportunity to express my opinions on some of these major issues that directly affect Iowa's fourth district, where agriculture is such a huge part of our economy and such an important part of our way of life. Growing up in Northwest Iowa, I now live in the small town of Lawton, just outside Sioux City in Woodbury County, and people enjoy living in small towns in Iowa. And I think it's important that we continue to make investments in our small and mid-sized farms across our district to make sure we have more opportunities for our businesses and our farms to grow and thrive. So I hope you'll consider supporting Dave Dawson for Iowa's 4th Congressional District. You can follow along with me on my Facebook page, Dave Dawson for Iowa, or go to my website, davedawsonforiowa.com. Thanks.
Awesome. Thank you for joining us, Dave. Appreciate it. And I'm going to go ahead and shut off the recording here.